to the first podcast, Ash and Ben Talk About Stuff. As titles go, it's not really leaving much to the imagination. Does exactly what it says on the tin, I think. I tried to come up with a more creative name. Ash, did you have any luck?
I had
coming
absolutely
up with
no luck whatsoever. I'm normally not that creative a person when it comes to names. I mean, just look at the WikiWalker stuff. It's like I'm just leaving it to the community to come up with all sorts of meme titles, because that seems to be a better idea than just having one strong name.
I think that works really nicely, though. I think that gives it the spirit of the community. But that aside, names are a thing, and this podcast is a new podcast series where Ash and Ben, that's Ash the Bash and Royal Flush, we're going to talk about stuff. It's
very Ron
this sounds
Seal,
really professionally just stammering into the first podcast, and it's a nice idea, we thought, and it would be good just to have a bit of a chat about stuff. We're going to have a guest each week, and we're going to have a buzzword, and we're just going to let the conversation flow and talk about stuff. And if we end up talking about completely unrelated stuff and having jokes and things, then that'll be good as well. And hopefully you'll find it entertaining listening. You can put it on in the car or on your way to work or something and think, this is nice. Maybe, and we might all learn something as well. We might not, but
yeah, that's the hope.
That sounds. I think that sounds about right. Our guest this week on Ash and Ben. Should I introduce guests first? Do you think, Ash, or should I say the topic first?
I think you should introduce the guest first.
All right, that's a good idea. That could become a convention. We're joined by Elias5891, Elias the Panda. Have you got any preference of how we should refer to you?
Elias is fine. I think that's probably what most people refer to me as in the digital world.
Is it Elias or Elias?
Technically, it's Elias because it's actually a portmanteau of my first and middle name, but Elias just kind of flows off the tongue a little better.
Whereas I go with the awkward one, I go with Elias because it's the only one that makes sense to me in my head.
I think I read it the first time and thought it's Elias, but we can sit here and argue about how to pronounce your name, but at least it's on the record now. It's Elias or Elias, but we'll go with Elias.
Or Panda, maybe.
Or Panda. Until such a time as I decide otherwise and start calling you something else. Good stuff. So, anyway, welcome to Panda, who's going to be talking to Ash and myself this week. And the subject this week on Ash and Ben Talk About Stuff is exams and stuff, which, as titles go, I think is probably quite maybe pertinent to maybe a lot of people in our communities and in the audience who might be listening, because the reason for that I originally came up with this idea was it was just as the GCSE results or the big exam results in the UK were coming out. And there was a lot of brouhaha around it, and I thought this could be a good point for discussion. One of the reasons we've brought Panda in today is because he, like me, is a former teacher. So we're going to talk a little bit about exams and things, and we'll talk about our own experiences and impart wisdom. Do you think we're qualified to impart wisdom?
Maybe not so much impart wisdom as share mistakes.
That's nice. Share mistakes. Learn from our mistakes. What's Panda? What's your background? From a school point of view, what were you like at school? Were you academic or talk to me about your school experience or experience of exams?
Yeah, well, as a youngling, as a little panda, I was always very much excited about school. Didn't have any brothers up until I started school, so it was like, oh, there's other people my age. So I got really into, school was the best place in the world to be. So I kind of had external reasoning for really enjoying that sort of academic environment. And as I went through it, I got good at it. I was a good test taker. I was, high grade, honor student, valedictorian. Whatever you typically think of when you think nerdy good student, that probably describes me.
Really interesting. There's a turn of phrase that you've used there that I think we might come back to when you said you were good at school, as though school is something that you can be good at or bad at rather than just something that everybody does. I think we might pick up on that later on, but you talked about there's a couple of words there that I think we just for us Brits over here may need sort of elucidating. So you talked about a grad student and valedictorian, which I mean, Ash, did you have valedictorians at
No,
school?
we didn't have valedictorians at all. No.
My understanding is it's someone who does a speech.
Interesting. In at least my area, valedictorian is usually the honor reserved in a graduating class for the student, or depending on the school, students who have the highest grade point average and highest academic record, using other references in case there's a tie. Typically, yes, they do give a speech at the graduation ceremony, but they're kind of known as the I won't say smartest student, but the highest ranked student via
Highest
sort of
achieving.
ranking. Yes.
Okay, and that's sort of just purely based on academic endeavours rather than anything else, or is there sort
yeah,
of both?
in most of the schools that I've visited, been around, it looked at your grade point average, so your literal grades in school, and used like community service activities as a tiebreaker.
Okay, so obviously there's a very different sort of style of schooling that happens in America from what happens in the UK. Ash, do you just want to outline sort of your school experience and just talk a little bit about how the structure of the schooling system in the UK works?
Well, yeah, it's sort of like, well, I had primary school up until, well, from the age of 5 till 11, and the only real proper examinations for that were the two key stages, Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, but those are just sort of like indicators of how well you did, not necessarily of any sort of importance as to where you went. The only examination I did that did have importance as to what kind of school I went into was the 11 plus, which is taken in your final year at primary school. If you want to,
Not old enough to do an 11 plus, are you?
Yeah.
It was abolished in like the 70s, I thought.
No, 11 plus is definitely still a thing when I did it, and still a thing up to this day.
Well, I never knew that.
So yeah, I took the 11 plus. It's an optional thing. It's only there really to serve as the entrance exam to the local grammar school, if I can guess, if you had a grammar school nearby you, or if not that, then I don't know what the criteria for entering in a specific school would be outside of that. So just to clarify here, just in case there's because a grammar school is something that might be sort of alien to some of our international audiences, and actually it's I didn't have a grammar school wasn't really an option for me at school. I was the same sort of year for age 5 up to 11, and then you went to a secondary school, and we were in a sort of catchment area, and I went to a Catholic primary school and secondary school because there was a fondness for God in my household where I grew up. Catholicism. I see. We were the Protestants. We did Church of England schools.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, I mean, you still get a lot of faith schools actually around in the country now, and a lot of people have, and it's actually just someone who works for the Church of England as a organist and musician there. It's really interesting seeing parents come in when their kids are like 8 and come to church every Sunday so that they can get the vicar to sign off on them and say they're a regular parishioner and they come to church all the time, so that then they get to year 6 and they can put the school application in so they can get their child into the Catholic school or into the Anglican school, because the schools tend to be better. Not always, but a lot of the time. So yeah, I was sort of ran down the Catholic education route, which, as far as I was concerned, I didn't really bother me much. Do you have faith schools in the US?
We do, actually. There's you use the term that they are good schools, which might be good to reference back to. But at the same time, yeah, we have, especially the city I currently live in, lots of mostly Catholic schools in the area. And a lot of parents do consider those to be the good schools to try to get your kids into. And it sounds like a lot of the same procedure. You've got to be a regular parishioner at the appropriate nearby church. as well as do some application stuff. And I think there's some testing to get in, but that all sounds very familiar. Definitely something we have over here as well.
But Ash, you said you were in a Church of England school, a Protestant style, but also a grammar school, which is a grammar school is a private school.
They are technically private schools, yes,
but answerable to the state. So private schools, insofar as you have to pay to go there.
No, not that.
Right.
No, it wasn't that. No.
So state funded.
It's a state school, yeah.
See, I always get confused because I didn't have a private education. My sister did. My younger sister had a private education, and I must confess we've not actually sat and talked about it. What the differences were. But I have a few friends who had a private education, and it does seem to be. You just need to read statistics. The private students who went to private schools comprise something like 85% of politicians and 70% of lawyers and 65% of doctors, but it's only something like 3% of the population do that, which slightly upsets me, actually. Do you think that? So, did you actually went to a grammar school in the end, Ash?
Yes, I did go into a grammar school. I might be mixing up the terms of private and public school at this point because I seem to recall making this mistake in the past. But yeah, it is definitely a grammar school as opposed to the other school that was in the same town, which was classed as a comprehensive school.
Yes. Now, there's things that a public school, as in publicly owned, now means a comprehensive, whereas a public school used to be exclusive, and it used to be one you went to that was actually a private school. So all the terminology has all got a bit washed up.
Yeah, that's where I'm mixing the terminology up. Yeah, exactly.
But so different types of school. Is there a private school system in the States, or in the state that you're in, at least, Panda?
There is, but there aren't very many private schools that aren't
Panda?
Also. Yes, there are some private schools, although most of them are religious private schools. There's not as many private schools that don't have a religious affiliation.
Okay. So they're not too dissimilar in terms of the makeup of school and the quality of school that's there. But in terms of the education system, now this is something I'm genuinely curious about and don't know. You have in America, you have a grade system. Is that's right?
Yes. Good.
I was going to say you pass a grade, and you hear stories about like there's a 16-year-old who's still in the 4th grade. Is that real, or is that just movie magic?
I think that extreme of a situation would be movie magic.
Right.
But it's traditionally you at 5 years old you go to an elementary school, which is our starting school, into the kindergarten class. At about age 6 you enter 1st grade, and then you usually enter a grade at that age plus 5. So a 10th grader would be a 15-year-old, an 8th grader 13, and so on.
So that's sort of comparable with what we've got in the UK, Ash, is that you go in at reception at age 4/5,
yeah,
and then you progress, and then you get to year 11 when you're 15/16.
Yes.
So qualification-wise, Panda, when you say you pass the 6th grade or you pass the 10th grade or whatever, are they actual qualifications, and is there an exam that you sit in order to do that, and does each year impact on your potential future development?
This is something I definitely, from what I know of the British system, is very different. For the most part, no. Generally, passing a grade simply means not getting Fs in every class in it. It's somewhat debatable. There are end-of-year exams, but those have no bearing on whether or not you advance through the grade you're in. And we definitely want to loop back to that, I think. But yeah, the end-of-year exams are not tied to whether or not you make it through a grade, typically.
So they're just sort of a metric for say, the school itself, rather than an official governmental figure? Or a sort of national exam?
That's a bit of a deep rabbit hole. Let's loop back to that, I think.
We'll come back there, okay. It was because, over here, it's much more. You do a year and you learn stuff in a year, and I think things like mathematics are the same in every language in every country, but I think specifically what you learn in a year, the idea of being able to fail year 7, like your first year in secondary school here, would be unheard of. However, when you get to about year 9, you start to streamline what you're actually going to study. So at year 9, I dropped geography, and I dropped history, and I dropped French, and I chose to do music and ICT and a technology called Systems and Control. And from year 10, you have 2 years, year 10 and year 11, where you're effectively studying towards one big exam towards the end of year 11, and there might be coursework that you have to do, written coursework or essays or projects, and then most of the exams, most of the qualifications culminate in a big exam at the end, and you get as many qualifications from as many exams as you do. So for me, for example, I got they're called GCSEs at the moment, till the government changes them again. But I've got one in English language, one in English literature, maths, 3 different sciences: chemistry, biology, physics, ICT, music, RS, systems of control, and German. So I've got 11 GCSEs, and those are when I was that age and coming out of year 11 and into I was going on to study further at that point. But had I decided at that point to go into the world of work, that would have been my passport, that would have been my template for everything I had going forward, those 11 qualifications. Ash, how many GCSEs did you get?
I had a total of 11 GCSEs, and they all ranged within A star through C grading, I believe, if I remember rightly.
So that's where we sort of start to parry up with America, where we have this A star through C grading
but
system.
It's changed in the last couple of years.
But of course,
GCSEs,
because Michael Gove, yeah.
GCSEs are now measured on a 1 to 9 scale, except only in some examinations are they measured in a 1 to 9 scale. In some examinations, and also in different countries in the UK, I think Wales is still holding on to the old A star, well actually sorry, A double star through G system, because they added a second star, I remember at one point.
It's just a mess.
It is a bit of a mess, but as far as how much the GCSEs helped me further along in my life, I could only say, so long as I had a C grade in English language, that is, rather than lit, then nobody really cared about any of the other GCSEs other than, oh yeah, they're grades, cool.
That's sort of my philosophy on it, and what I tell to younger sort of students and family friends and stuff when they're getting results, is that everything is just a passport to the next level. Are you now doing what you wanted to do? Have you got enough to do what the next step of your, or the next chapter of your life is? 9 times out of 10 the answer is yes. In which case you can forget about your GCSEs. They're not they're not the be all and end all, which I think is probably the message I slightly want to deliver.
Yeah, the only thing is that me being a grammar school that also had then a what's called a 6th form, which is sort of like the extension, year 12, year 13, to do
I had one
further
of them as well.
examinations and things like that. They did have a entry requirement for what your GCSEs were to be able to be accepted to be part of the 6th form, because at that point there were other students from other schools that could decide to go to our school for the 6th form for those final 2 years, and they would also be held to the same entry requirements. So
that sounds a very familiar experience to what I had. In fact, I actually changed schools from from year 11 into year 12, from GCSE into the next step, which is A levels. And yeah, I mean the curriculum is all a mess at the moment, because the government likes to change things up every few years, to a point where you've actually, theoretically, an employer could have people applying for the same job that have 3 different versions of the same qualification. So the old O levels, which is what was there prior to GCSEs, then GCSEs, and now the new GCSEs, which are GCSEs but 1 to 9. And it's just like, why change it? Everyone understands it. There was a Daily Mash article I saw, and it said all GCSE result students are busy converting the numbers into proper GCSE results before they tell their parents what they got.
And the further complication to all that is that in the UK, at the very least, there are several different examination bodies, and dependent on which examination body you subscribe to for different subjects, because, of course, for some reason, one school doesn't subscribe to the same examination body for all of the subjects across the board. You can do, like, I seem to recall that AQA English Language and Literature was a far harder exam to do in comparison to, like, the sort of EdXL equivalent of it, or any of the others that I can't remember off the top of my head.
OCR.
OCR was the other one, indeed, yes. That's the one, yeah.
And it's just, the exams are designed, to tell students apart. It's when schools start mucking about and picking different exam boards so that, they can manipulate the grade. It's like, there's a David Mitchell joke where he says, you know what, you're all brilliant. You've all got like 19 A stars. You could all be Professor of Latin. And you can share the Professor of Latin salary amongst you and starve. Which I think sort of just cuts to the heart of what exams are supposed to be about, which is they are supposed to be telling people apart. Panda, obviously, the American system, do you have like different examining bodies or different exam boards that sort of have a final exam at the end of school? What happens when you hit 16 in American high school?
We do. Kind of for those who are more American, maybe don't equate quite as well to your year 9 through year 11 equivalents. Our high school is grades 9 through 12. Kind of
right.
Like you all can drop classes. That's where in America we have some flexibility on, I'm going to take some more advanced math courses or more English courses. We still have a minimum prerequisite to hit. Maybe you have to take 3 maths, 3 Englishes, 3 sciences. But you still have to take them. We do have, gearing towards some big exams, but the big exam for most Americans is either the ACT or the SAT. These are two different exams.
I've heard of SAT because they reference that in the film about Facebook, Social Network. That's the one.
They're two different styles, two different companies that run national exams. The ACT is a little more regional, more toward the eastern half of the U.S. SAT is a little more national, equal. And those are kind of the two big tests that I won't say they are huge outside of college entrance exams. So kind of like you said, it's good to get you into the next stage of education, the next step in life. But after that, it's kind of a passing notice. The ACT is kind of a test of math, English, science. The SAT, math and English. So there's not really any historical study there, which, based on the newness of our country, may be part of the reason. I don't know.
You've mentioned college application there, and I recognise this is rapidly turning into a spot the difference between American and British education systems, which, I mean, it is a personal project for me, if nothing else, because I genuinely don't know, despite having quite a lot of friends online who are American. Because what you call college, we call university, is that right?
Yes. We use the term university and college somewhat interchangeably over here. In America, technically, our definitions that we use, a university is a compilation of multiple colleges under a single location. So, I'm in the state of Kentucky.
So what's Harvard?
Harvard is a university because it has a college of law, a college of medicine, and other colleges within it.
So a college, you would go and study one particular subject, but that's what a college is entirely sort of dedicated to. That would be like Ash going. So I was just saying, because Ash, you went to the University of. Did you go? You went Sheffield?
No, I did not. No, it was Teesside University up in Middlesbrough.
Oh, and the actual frozen north.
The actual frozen north. Yeah.
I mean, would that be a sort of like the University of Teesside only did computer game design, or would it be the University of Teesside has lots of different facets to it? The University of Teesside College Hyper Bunny or whatever, which focuses on computer game design.
if you're going by definition, it would be if it's a true university, it would have a college of maybe computer science and then a college of something else. Now, having said that is a dictionary definition, a lot of schools no longer subscribe to that definition and just use the words interchangeably. So, really, if you hear someone in America say they're going to college or university, they probably mean the same thing, that they're just going to the next level of education after the legally mandated public school system that ends in...
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So that finishes at what, age 18? 17, 18?
17, 18, depending on when you started, yes. And assuming you don't get held back.
What's the sort of weighting or the sort of social pressure, I suppose, to go to college or university? Because I don't know about you, Ash. For me, when I was in sixth form and doing my A-levels, it was slightly rammed down your throat a little bit that you should go to university because Labour government and university and pay lots of money, pay £3,000 a year to go to university. Which I don't. Did you escape top-up fees, or did you get them? Because I was the first year with them.
So yeah, in sixth form, it was kind of rammed down our throats that university is the thing you must do. It kind of stemmed from the fact that the then head teacher was an he got a degree from Oxford, something or other to do with mathematics. So he was kind of like, everyone must be on the Oxbridge system. You must submit an application to Oxford or Cambridge, or you are an outcast. And so when they saw my UCAS application saying I want to do computer games programming at all places, Teesside University, they were like, no, why are you doing that? Why don't you do like a mathematics degree at this prestigious Cambridge University? It's like, because I don't. I want to do computer games programming. So yeah, it was kind of.
I can imagine you doing a mathematics. I imagine you're probably quite good at maths.
I'm not that good at maths, not really. I've forgotten a lot of.
Oh, come now!
I've forgotten a lot of the A-level maths I used to do, and I mean, I didn't even do further maths. So, yeah, I'm not
Goodness
that good.
me! I must clutch my pearls. Not even doing further maths. You heathen!
I know. How dare I do things like music and computing instead of further maths?
Oh God! What a peasant doing a soft subject like music. That's what they called it. They call it a soft subject, and it used to really annoy me that people said that music was or not a proper ed. Or people used to say you've not got a proper degree because you've got a degree in music. I was like, yeah, I went bloody hard for my degree in music. And you know, it really winds me up that there is still that. Disparity between and the schools will ram that down your throat that you need to do in a massive inverted commas proper subject. I mean, is there anything like that in the States?
Oh,
Panda?
100%.
Oh, there is.
Oh yes, very very much. If you want to get a job and earn any money, you must get into a good college, and then you must get something that's not a liberal arts degree, which is kind of the equivalent of a soft subject. It sounds like.
In inverted commas, of course. A liberal arts degree. I've seen that being the butt of the joke. There was a joke I once read, and it says it's something like the mathematician asks, "How big is it?" and the economist asks, "How much will it cost?" and the scientist asks, "How does it work?" and the liberal arts major asks, "Would you like fries with that?"
Yeah, that's a pretty common joke format.
Which I find deeply distressing as someone who has effectively got an undergraduate and then later a master's degree in one of these so-called soft subjects.
Well, this is the interesting thing. The grammar school that I went to, they have since actually become an academy, as it's called, and do
you want to just tell us a bit about what an academy is?
I mean, I don't really know much more than most people about it, but it's more specifically designed, like they've actually gotten specific funding from the government or the local authorities or whatever to focus on a certain aspect of, you know, certain type of education. And in their case, it was the arts. So
so a specialist school.
Yes, they become a specialist
they
school.
do a
Yes,
specialist art school or a specialist science school.
yes.
My understanding, just from an educator's point of view, is it's just to do with, it comes back to the whole difference between a grammar school and a private school again. That an academy is. People talk about privatising the NHS by the back door. It's sort of like that, in that an academy is. There are shareholders. It is privately. There is a private company, and they may have, a dozen or more schools on their books, and they. Well, very often they will parachute management around. So if there's a failing school in a particular area, they might take a head from a very good school within that academy chain, parachute them into this school over here for 2 terms, so that it can turn it around and improve for the next Ofsted, which is the school's inspectorate thing. Of course, we'll get there. I mean, the other thing to add into that is that we've got these things called free schools now, which is actually where I spent. That's where I spent my time for 4 years. I started out I actually trained as a primary teacher initially when I did my teacher training. Somehow ended up teaching secondary music in this free school, which was a brand new school, never been opened before, and I went in at sort of ground zero on this school as a music teacher. And by the second term, I was teaching music and drama. Despite, I'm a little bit theatric, but I've not really studied drama. By the time I started my second year, I was essentially head of performing arts in all but name, and so this free school is one that's funded by central government, but is free from any sort of control from an academy chain or from local authorities. So you have the principal and the governors and the staff have much more creative freedom over their curriculum and such like. But anyway, we're diverting off. Where were we? Academy. That was, you were talking about. And specialist schools, and that was it. Arts, liberal arts degrees,
yes.
And soft subjects, or ostensibly soft subjects. So, Ash, you've got a degree in computer game design.
Programming. I'll make that distinction. Programming is very different to design.
Computer game programming, not computer game design. Okay.
Yes.
I've got a degree, an undergraduate degree in music and a master's degree in music performance. Panda, your credentials?
I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics with a minor in education, and then a master's in business administration, actually.
Oh, okay. That's different. How did that come about?
The graduate school, which offered the master's program that I did, actually offered a dual master's, a master's in business administration and a master's in IT management and development, which is the one I wanted. So I was like, let's just get them both. It was like one. It was about 3 extra courses to take. So I actually have 2 masters.
Oh. What's graduate school? Sorry, come back. Is that the same as college, but
once you
higher?
Get out of the public schools, the mandatory 12 year or 13 years, you have different degrees which roughly correlate to how long it takes to get them. You have an associate's degree, which is usually a 2-year degree. A bachelor is a 4 years degree. A master's is usually 2 additional years on top of that. And then a doctorate is usually 2 to 6 more years on top of that.
Blimey. That's a lot longer than you get in the UK. I mean, the standard fare in the UK is 3 years for an undergraduate and 1 for a master's if you're doing it full-time, 2 if you're doing it part-time.
Mine was 4 years because I had a sandwich degree. I had an extra year.
You had a placement year,
didn't you? Year at Ubisoft Reflections, yes, working on Driver San Francisco.
Nice. Which I think is probably... I was about to make a joke about you being the only one not having a master's degree, but I'm not going to do that because you had a sandwich year working for Ubisoft, which I imagine probably, in terms of the industry you wanted to go into, was probably more valuable than a piece of paper saying you've got extra study. I would wager.
Yeah, although the degree that I got was officially sanctioned by a sort of body of people that are the sort of like industry standards for computer games programming, that kind of luck. So it was very officially recognised in the UK that if you got this degree, then you know what you're going to be doing. But yes, that 1 year at Ubisoft working on a AAA title was completely and utterly invaluable. It was just the best thing that could have happened during my education.
I might be way off the mark here, but would it be appropriate and fair to use an analogy such as the degree was like the driving test, but the placement year was like driving on the road with real drivers?
Very much so.
So, I mean, I don't know if you found, Panda, when you did your driving test, that actually you do your driving lessons and they teach you to pass the test, and then you actually get on the road and you've got to learn to drive in a completely different way, reacting to how other people drive.
I think the American and British driving system may be a good topic for another time, as that's a little different as well.
Of course, you only have two pedals, don't you?
Well, that's true, yes. But no, I don't know what you mean by driving class. I've never had one of those, so...
Oh, okay. That's there. We'll put a pin in that then for another time.
And I know a bit about the Japanese driving system as well.
Is that the one where... No, it's Egyptian, where you've got to drive 10 metres forward, 10 metres backwards, and then park between two traffic cones.
That's the Egyptian one, yeah. Japanese one is equally weird, but yeah, that's for another time.
The Japanese one where you've got 100 theory questions and they're all multiple choice, and one of them is you find a road traffic accident victim on the road with their guts hanging out. Do you A, call an ambulance, or B, try and push the guts back in?
No, that's the UK theory test.
Really?
Yeah, that's on the UK theory test.
I'm pretty sure there's nothing quite as explicit as that of the theory test. I failed my theory first time.
Oh, did you?
Believe it or not.
Oh,
yeah, because every man and his dog who was already driving, including my girlfriend at the time, had said to me, "Oh, theory's easy. It's easy. It's well easy." They used other more colourful language because we were in our early 20s, but it's really easy. It's a piece of easiness. So I just took them at their word and didn't do any studying for it at all. I just said, "Well, I've been in a passenger in a car. I've had 20 hours of driving lessons. What could be the problem here?" And then failed. And it's like, doing
so
Pikachu
did you fail
face
on
at
the
the
actual
letter.
theory part or the hazard awareness section?
No, the hazard perception was fine. It was the actual multiple choice bit.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't. I didn't fail by a lot. There wasn't a huge amount in it. There's sort of 5 or 6 marks or something like that. But I got really despondent after that, and then just stopped having driving lessons for about 3 years. And then it became a problem when I was in a job where I really, really could have done with having a car. And I thought, this is stupid. So I then went back to it, passed the theory, and then actually passed my practical first time.
It's a bit swoo. I was third pass.
Third?
Yeah.
Goodness me. What went wrong?
Well, the first time was... the first time was I stopped at the wrong side of a junction because I was allowing for space for a lorry just in case of a certain thing happening, but apparently the right thing for me to do was actually drive right up the side behind him so that he couldn't see me. I don't know why that was. And the second one was... The second fail was... I think it was... it was on one of the manoeuvres. I failed the turn in the road.
Reverse around corner?
No,
turn in the road. Okay.
Reverse around the corner is no longer a thing now, but I did those.
Oh, is it not?
Yeah, they've taken that out of the syllabus now.
Ah.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of because not many people use that particular manoeuvre anymore, so they don't test it anymore.
I remember I had a mock test before my first practical, and I tried. And my examiner was my instructor rather was doing an impression of an examiner, and it sort of affected this persona of this really stern, gruff, unfriendly examiner. Because you might have an examiner who's lovely and friendly. You might have an examiner who won't give you the time of day if you asked. So I was really nervous by this, and one of the things he asked me to do was reverse around the corner. And at this point, I was pretty sure I'd already failed this mock test. And so I was there on the corner, and I was like, and I wasn't going anywhere. I thought I'd give it a bit more gas. And then he just said with his complete, and he was quite a nice guy actually, and he's normally quite jolly, but he just said with his completely deadpan voice, "You cannot complete the manoeuvre when the parking brake is engaged." I thought, tried to reverse around the corner with the handbrake on. I thought, well, should we just end it here, Simon? Let's just call it time. Let's just go get a burger and have a fag, and that would be much better. So yeah, that was massively embarrassing for everyone involved.
For our international audience out there, the word fag means cigarette.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, that's a misnomer that might come across rather strangely. I don't actually smoke, I'm sure you're well aware. I vape now. I don't actually smoke cigarettes anymore. Are you guys smokers or been smokers?
Never ever have I smoked.
Former
smoker. Okay, a never ever and a former.
Mm-hmm.
It's just. That's about as exciting as that conversation
much,
gets, I suppose. There's not much to talk about these days.
Interesting that you all had so much issue with your driving tests. We do have a driving test that you have to take to get your license.
You have actually got a test at least.
Yes,
okay.
A written test. We have a written test which gives you a permit, which gives you conditional driving, and then a practical which you must take 6 months later. I failed the practical the first time because I didn't show up. Good way to fail.
You didn't show up.
Ooh.
I mean, that's a good way of failing a test, is by not showing up to it.
Indeed.
So it's sort of like the best way of not getting, because I never wanted to have a job, and the best way, there's a foolproof way, if in the event of an interview, wear flip-flops. You will never be employed.
No. But my second attempt, I actually have a restriction on my permit that I must be wearing my glasses to drive, because my vision, I could not pass the vision test without them. I had broken my glasses.
I know we got something similar over here. Oh, God.
So, I actually went to the dollar store and picked up a pair of reading glasses before my exam. And was just trying to, squint out from under them because they made things so much worse.
How old were you at this point?
17.
Have a chat with 17-year-old Panda half a lifetime ago and say, what were you thinking?
Well, it was bad. It was not the best performance. And then we get to what is considered the hardest part of the American test, is the parallel parking. Two cones, park between. That's about as hard as it gets. Park between two cones. Yeah. Don't hit the cones. I hit the cones. Somehow I hit both the cones. I don't even know how I did that.
Oh, that's clever.
It's not like shooting the moon, where it cancels it out if you hit both of them.
It kind of did, because I was apparently the last person for the month to apply for their license, and the person was like, "You really need to practice this better, but here you go," and just gave me a pass for it.
No way.
Yep. I actually did something that should have been an automatic fail and still got my license. Still, for the life of me, I cannot parallel park well.
Do you know, the worst part about parallel parking is the judgment from other people. If you're in a rush and you're on parallel parking on a narrow street and there's 3 cars behind you, you think, right, I've got one attempt to do it, and the length of the space is like a car and a half's length. And it's like, right, I've got one attempt to get this right, because the cars are they're mounting out, and then you do the manoeuvre. And you go in diagonally, and you're on the curb, and then you run a cat over, and you think, no, I'm going on. I don't care. There's no other place to park in the whole of the city. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back.
Exactly.
It's. We're talking about a different exam now, driving exam. So this is still relevant to the podcast, which is really nice.
So yeah,
examination.
I think
driving exams are a good thing.
Yeah.
I think people should be examined before having control of a lethal vehicle that can kill people.
Oh yes.
One thing I'm just going to loop back to, where we were just talking about the social pressure to go to university. And we talked about it in the UK, and it was very much a buzz and a push for everyone should go to university. Despite the fact that when I went to university, they had this thing called top-up fees, where the tuition fees went from something like... Well, Ash will be able to tell you what they went from, I suspect, and I'll be able to tell you that they went up.
I was lucky. I was in the lucky few years where it was only $3,000 a year. Oh,
that's lucky. That's the first year of top-up fees. Yeah, I got that as well, $3,000 a year. Prior to that, it had been 1,100 or something, but you couldn't get funding for it, I think, or something like that. Whereas when it went up to £3,000 a year, there was a whole body student finance where actually you could get a student loan that would just automatically pay for your tuition, and then you got maintenance tuition so that you could pay for rent and beer and socks and things. But now it's like £9,000 plus per year.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, I just find staggering considering the amount of actual contact time I had at university. But then again, as I've actually discovered, and more recently, is that if you're measuring it minute for minute, hour for hour, your £9,000 doesn't go very far. But you're actually not just paying for that tuition with your lecturers and your tutors. You're paying for access to the library and the facilities, and you're paying for all the overheads and the building and the receptionists and the auditors and everything else that goes on there is being paid for. So you're paying for the experience as well as the education.
Yep.
And the facilities, which I fully didn't appreciate until literally about 3 or 4 months ago, when I had a conversation with a lecturer friend of mine at the Royal Northern College of Music. He said, actually, there's a lot more that you're paying for beyond your one-to-one tuition. But, I mean, in the States, is there the same sort of pressure? Because I always hear people about, you've got to put money in your college fund and you've got to save up for it from a very young age. And, I mean, what's the sort of social implications and standing of college education in the States?
It's, from a social standpoint, it's very elitist that if you don't have a college education, that's a down. It is a little bit of a hindrance when it comes to job searching. Usually people will use colleges as a good starting point on what your experience is if you don't have work experience to cover it. So it's very heavily pushed to go there. And you mentioned top-up cost. What did you say about right now as the average per year?
£9,000, I think, is what it's capped at.
Oh, capped.
Some universities charge less, but some most charge $9,000 per year, or somewhere in that region.
Okay, I went ahead and pulled up University of Kentucky. It's not where I went, but semi-close, and it's a well enough university to most Americans and anybody who follows basketball because they have a really good basketball program. Their annual costs are for a undergraduate student who lives on campus. Annual tuition is $31,000.
Oh my God!
And
$31,000
is considered a very average cost school. If you go to an Ivy League school, you're
Ivy League, is that the equivalent of Russell Group? So that's your Harvard, your Yales, and Browns and stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Bloody hell! I'm trying to keep the podcast clean. That's okay. That's a very British. That's the British expression of mild shock.
Mild shock. That sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh, bloody hell. No, that's really weird because Oxford and Cambridge and Durham and Manchester and the leading they're called the Russell Group, the top 20 universities here, are the same as the bottom sort of 10 percentile. I mean, you might go down to like University 161. Where I haven't got it's the Times does the good university guide, and I don't have the numbers handy. But if you go down there, you might get down to 8,300 or something. But most of them are charging the cap.
Well, Scotland is a bit different in the UK.
Apart from Scotland,
don't charge at all if you are in Scotland or an EU member. If you're from England, then yes, you're privy to potentially up to £9,000. Non-EU international students, non-EU international students though can be charged anywhere up to £23,000 per year.
Even that sounds sort of. I suppose that's probably similar to the 31,000. But I mean, I just look at that and then I think about European education. So I've got my best friend's wife is German, although she was raised in the UK. But she told me that basically higher education, university education in Germany is basically free if you're a German citizen. And I think this sort of draws a really interesting point between the different sort of views of society and culture, in that Europe is tends to be quite supportive of education and stuff, and America seems to be much more privatized in that way. And the UK is a sort of semi-permeable membrane of the two, and we've got this small constitutional crisis called Brexit at the moment going on.
Oh, please don't start that now. That's at least a four-parter podcast episode.
That's a four-parter. Maybe next week or in a future podcast. But one of the I'm not to wax lyrical about Brexit, because I could do the entire evening with that. But one of the things that has been said about it is that there is this cultural division that people feel we, as the UK, are more like America than we are like Europe. And actually, I personally don't feel that. I feel more akin to people in Europe and their way of life and their view of the world than I do when I look at sort of the massive capitalism that I see in America. We are veering dangerously close to politics, though, aren't we? But yeah, let's go back to universities.
But the thing is, I think you have to, because to some degree, at least in America, education has been a political issue.
Driven by the politics, yeah.
Exactly. I'm not
There's
sure
always a political hot potato in the UK as well, but yeah. When you say it's a political issue, sorry, I interrupted you.
It's quite okay. Have either of you heard of something called No Child Left Behind? It was a big rallying cry a couple decades ago.
It sounds very similar to something called Every Child Matters that we had in the UK.
I imagine it's probably similar in concept. Originally, it was designed as just a way to mandate that all students are getting the same education. That went very political very quickly. Turned into a class game. It actually was on the books until 2015, I believe, at which point it was replaced by a much more generous law. And this kind of brings us back directly into exams. One of the conditions of No Child Left Behind is that in the high school level, especially, there are mandated school exams. There are tests that the 9th graders, the 10th graders, the 11th graders must take. They don't affect the students themselves, but they reflect upon the school's performance and would dictate how much funding they get. If they do poorly too often, the government will step in and replace employees. So it was very...
That does sound quite familiar. Tests that have no bearing on the pupil or the student's future or well-being, but are purely to do with the institutions in which they are, which I think is fundamentally backwards when it comes to education. It's just a personal feeling of mine.
I 100% agree. As it led to, as a teacher, the phrase "teach to the test" was brought up a lot, because you did not have the
teach
freedom.
To the test. Same with like a driving test.
Yeah, I mean, like I was a geometry teacher. When I took geometry class, when I thought about geometry class, there was lots of, proofs. Prove that if this is true, then that leads to this being true. That was not covered on the test at all, and I was told explicitly I could not cover it in class. And that sort of just overreach into the classroom was a huge thing that, 20 years that was in the laws, so...
Is this there's a scene in the film Donnie Darko, which I don't know if you guys have seen.
Oh, I've seen it, yeah.
Where Jake Gyllenhaal's character is talking to one of his science teachers, and they're talking about the concept of science and time travel and predestination and whatever. But basically, there's this one scene where the teacher stops the conversation. He says, "I'm going to have to stop this conversation," and Jake Gyllenhaal's character says, "Why?" And he says, "Because I could lose my job." Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about? You're not allowed to discuss certain subjects with... Not
to that degree that I couldn't talk about the subjects, but if it's not uncommon. I don't know if this was common for you as a teacher, but it's not uncommon that as a teacher I would have the other teachers or the administration, the principal, vice principal, superintendent, whoever, come in and monitor a class periodically. And teaching something that was not explicitly going to be covered on the test was a sign for disciplinary action. So
Wow.
you could do it, but just not in the context of classroom time.
I mean, I think mine was because I wasn't sort of teaching to a level where I'm preparing something for a final exam. I mean, if I were if I had a GCSE drama class, that's probably the closest it came for a year. Now, because they know the syllabus, and I think it's quite right that if you are preparing for a test, I mean, my wife has done exams in the finance sector, and she'll if she had been going in to do an advanced pensions exam and spent all of her time revising estate planning, then she would quite rightly fail the exam, because the exam is testing this particular knowledge area. But I think when you're in, and I think that's fine, because that's how it should be when you're in the professional world and you're looking to improve in a particular niche area. Mm-hmm. But I think when you're in school, when you're at a level where children are probably not going to be hardbound to be doing making decisions about what they want to do with their futures, or even what they necessarily want to study at college or university, if you've got such a prescriptive curriculum that actually it doesn't give you any scope to be flexible and get them to enjoy the subject or the experience of learning, then I think that's really something really quite unpleasant then. And it doesn't surprise me that I see, lots of teachers switching off and coming away from education, because everything becomes so riveted and bolted to the thing. I mean, I think mine was slightly different, because when I was in the free school, prior to GCSE level teaching, I wrote the curriculum. I still had to, have stocks and balances and checks and balances and see where, were pupils making progress, but I dictated what that progress was in writing the curriculum, and if I decided this is the subject area, then I can then teach to that. Mm-hmm. So, I just think exams are such a means to an end, but they ultimately they don't. It's all just a passport. And so, I mean, if we've got any listeners who are in the thick of exams, or they've done exams recently, or they're about to do exams, or they're worried about exams coming up, I mean, I just think there are means to an end. And if you've got an idea of what you want to do, then great. Then pursue, work towards that, but not at the expense of everything else. Tim Minchin says you should set your mind to working on lots and lots of short-term goals, because if you have one big goal in the distance, then you miss the shiny things in your peripheral vision, which is more often than not where the exciting things in life happen. I could certainly give more examples of that, but I won't. Ash, I mean, what were you like at school? And I'm just looping back to that. One of the very first questions we asked is, were you good at school, and sort of interpret at your leisure? Were you sort of academically, able and bright? Did you find school easy, either from a social or an academic point of view?
Yeah, I was fairly academic, but not. I wasn't really there to really want to learn a great deal, to be honest. It was I enjoyed my time there, and I enjoyed learning stuff, but I wasn't sort of hungry for the academia at that point. That came a bit more when as you sort of narrow in on a certain subject that you want to do specifically and want to have a drive for, that's when it started driving forward, that I did want to be slightly more academic. And then the university degree happened, and then that set me for the rest of my life. So it's the sort of school, it was fine, but I found myself just doing what I loved doing at the time, which wasn't necessarily academic. Which is a weird way. I mean, we did have music at school, and that was where I spent a lot of my time was doing music and sort of after-school bands and things like that. But they weren't particularly, there was no examination based on me being in a soul band or a jazz band. It was just, I enjoy doing that, and that kind of experience of being in the school soul band and in the school orchestra and things like that have helped me to enjoy doing music as a as a side to my normal everyday life, and just sort of as a pastime.
This is the thing that because as a you and I are we're sort of inverse in a way, in that you are a full-time professional programmer and earn your living as a programmer, whereas and do music on the side for presumably, I know you do it professionally and you're of a high enough level that you call yourself professional, but if you gave up the game stuff, could you survive off your music income?
Could I survive off of my music income just as it currently stands? No, nowhere near.
Right. So you're doing music as a sort of addition to the side, whereas I'm like the other way round, and my thrust of life is doing music stuff and running choirs, and my side project is making computer games, which I make a little bit of money from, but not a lot, and certainly not enough to live off. So, and I made the mistake until very, very later in life than I'm, I want to be honest about admitting to, but until probably about 2 years ago, I was very confused when people had music lessons and didn't want to turn that into a job. Because I've always gone through life, because since the age of about 14, I've wanted to be a musician of some sort and have music be the heart of my professional life. And it's why when I had students who wouldn't practice, I got very frustrated. It's like, but you're going to be musicians, surely. And even to the level when I was actually at degree level, and people who were effectively having music lessons admittedly on a larger scale at university, but had no intention of wanting to be a musician, because that is just happens to be the path that they'd gone to. And I've got friends of mine who I was reading music with at university who are now accountants. There's quite a few of them are teachers, but some of them are doing completely unrelated things to music. And I think where I'm sort of drawing to with this slightly waffly train of thought is that age where you go and set up what you want to do for your life, i.e. 18 to 21, both in America and in the UK, where you set yourself up, right, this is what I'm going to do. Is that too young to make a firm decision about what it is you're going to do for the rest of your life? Or to phrase that question another way, has the world now changed to a point where a person doesn't necessarily have one career for their entire life, whereas my parents, or certainly my grandparents' generation, would have had... my granddad was a builder, and that's all he did. And that was how he identified himself, whereas now... that doesn't seem to be the case as much, and this push towards doing academic subjects because it opens up your options when the world is constantly changing and the world of work is always very different. Is that the right way to set young people up? There's a question in there somewhere.
There is definitely a question in there somewhere. I definitely feel that it's... If you asked me maybe 10 years ago, then my thought would have been, yes, you sort of get yourself built up for one specific career path, and that is it for the rest of your life. But if you ask me now, that's not how I would think anymore. I would believe that anyone can choose to change their career quite drastically at various points in their life if that's how they feel like they wanted to go. And there's that much information around now, we're being in the information age, as it were, that anyone could go and learn whatever they want, whenever they want, regardless of age.
I think that's quite a neat philosophy, and I mean, I'm very open to it. I mean, I'm a living example of someone who's started off on one career and then decided to try my hand at something else, and I'm now, there's a part of my brain that's thinking, if I wanted to go back and get a proper job, because I don't have proper jobs at the moment. I run choirs, so I work maybe 12 hours a week, but it's all evenings and weekends, and it's quite intense chunks of time. But for the majority of the daytime, I'm at home and I'm developing computer games for my own self gratification and pleasure, and I'm learning new stuff while I'm doing it. But if I ever wanted to go and become a programmer or a coder working for a larger company, I would find myself falling very short, because at the moment I know enough skills about programming to do what I want to do, and I'm always learning new stuff. But I don't necessarily have that foundation of having gone and studied it, done it intensely for 3 or 4 years, and worked on the job where there is a safety net, if you like, because you're just a student. And if I wanted to go and do that and retrain in that now, that would be phenomenally expensive, more than because I've already got a degree. I wouldn't qualify for any student funding, and I'd have to pay a lot more in addition to the £9,000. It wouldn't be subsidised. Panda, do you have any sort of feelings on the sort of career path conversation?
Before I answer that, Ash, when did you... Ben mentioned that he knew by 14 at least that he wanted to have music as his foundation for his career, it sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
Sound that correct, Ben?
I mean, I was going to be a doctor until I wasn't going to be a doctor anymore.
So when did you hit programming as what you wanted to do, Ash?
So that is a difficult one, because throughout my primary and secondary education, programming had never really been touched upon at all in the sort of academic life. It was only when I started doing computing as the AS level course, when they started introducing programming as Visual Basic 6, anyone who knows what that is and how wonderful Visual Basic is. Yeah, I know, great, isn't it? But just doing Visual Basic 6 stuff got me really interested into programming in general, and the fact that I also loved video games just in general helped to cement that. Now, I will also preface that although I did say that I hadn't done any programming at all in my academic life, I did actually start doing programming just outside of school completely from the age of... Oh, God, when did I get Div Game Studio? Oh, that's going back. That must have been at the age of 12 or 13, something like that. So Div Game Studio was a DOS-based video game programming system, loosely based on the C language. They actually had their own language, but it was kind of C-like. And they had enough in there for you to be able to make sort of 8 or 16-bit quality kind of games that worked in the DOS system. And I really loved doing that, just as a sort of a side thing, just for fun at the time. Yay, I'm a nerd.
Nerds unite, love it.
So I was really interested in that, just on my own, as it were. And it's only then when computing came along and it sort of established as a potential career path that computer games programming is a real career path that I could follow, and this is how you do it. Then that's where the real bug happened. So that would have been at the age of 16 going 17.
So early teens for the interest, and then more solid in your later teens.
Yes.
Now me, with my original main career of being a teacher, I had decided I wanted to do that at the age of 3. And that never changed throughout my mandatory
Really?
schooling.
Wow.
Impressive.
And...
I meet people who sort of feel like they're born to be teachers, but I've massive respect for people who are so minded.
And granted, I became disillusioned with the way it works at the time in my area. Once I did it for a few years and kind of moved to a different interest. So, but being somebody who had kind of a set interest from the get-go and never deviated from that path until they got into that career, I can say switching over to what I do now, which is kind of data analytical work, was a lot simpler than I thought it would be. And it kind of related to what Ash said. There's at this stage in how the internet works and the computer age that we're in, it's very easy to get information and to further yourself educationally kind of on your own time if you have the gumption and the ability to do so.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think everybody could do it, but I think many could. And whereas, I think if my father, who did financial stuff most of his life, I don't think he could have changed gears as easily as I have, for example. And so I think...
Do you think that's more to do with the world in which we live, or do you think it's to do with the changing mentality of the population, or a combination?
I think it's definitely a combination. I think one has kind of led to the other. As things have become easier, society's been like, oh, okay, well, you can do this, and then you can do that. And as people have started doing it, it's become easier and easier to do it because there's become a market for it. And the two have kind of fed off each other, I feel like.
Very much so, yeah.
So, in summing up, because we've been going sort of just over an hour now, and incidentally, we sort of went in, we thought 30 to 60 minutes, but we'll let the conversation flow naturally. If there's people listening who are sort of caught up in the exam rigmarole, I mean, we've talked a lot about the whether exams are good or bad, and how a lot of the time they're a sort of a passport to the next level, if you like. But sometimes exams are purely evil, and they're there just to cause stress, like if it's there to get a good mark for the school rather than for any benefit for the student. What Panda, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe 13, 14, maybe even 16, 18 years old, who's possibly even older at university or college level, who's faced with exams, isn't quite sure what they want to do, but they're studying something that they think they like and they think they're good at and they're enjoying, but they're not sure if they want to do it as a full-time career, and they're having a big stress about the exams that are coming up for this subject, potentially to the point where they're no longer enjoying it. What would you say to someone in that situation?
One thing that I often said to my students was, just because you hate taking a science test doesn't mean you're going to hate doing science. The exams are very different than what the career is, or what the future path of it is. It's a step, it's a hurdle sometimes, but it's not the end-all be-all. Yes, you'll have to, do so well to kind of get your foot in the door, but after that, usually you can work around however you've done on exams, so long as you can get enough to get that foot in the door.
And Ash, what would you say to somebody who perhaps is at school who isn't quite... And we didn't really jump too much into that question about what is being good at school, but by whatever metric you care to put to it, someone who isn't good at school, not someone who's necessarily academically challenged, but perhaps somebody who doesn't maybe fit in with the ebb and flow of the societal systems of a school, or maybe somebody who's good at a particular subject that the school doesn't necessarily cater for. What advice would you give to somebody like that?
I'm not that much of a philosophical person.
So put you on the spot like that.
You put me on the spot with this one. What would I say to someone like that? I really don't know what I would say, to be honest. It's just... Because
drawing on you...
The thing is that you're just going to be... Because you're going to be stuck in that particular education system, unless you can find another way to learn what you want to learn, either through like homeschooling or just trying to find some other way of finding that information, like through YouTube or these learning platforms like Curiosity Stream, that kind of thing. Maybe those could be different avenues that you can follow to try and find what you want to do. And yeah, that's kind of the only thing I can think of at the moment.
I think there's much about much what I sort of wanted to say myself. There's a really good philosophical lesson, or a thought experiment almost. It's a lecture given by his ancient professor, I forget his name, and he says he was a college professor, university professor, and he said one of the things he often asks his students is, what would you do if money were no object? And a lot of them poo-poo that idea and say, well, that's ridiculous because money's the thing that makes the world go round and yada, yada, yada. But he said, well, just hypothesize for a minute. And a lot of them said, well, they want to be painters or they want to be poets or they want to be artists, but everyone knows there's no money to be made in that. And his advice was, pursue the thing that you want to do and don't worry about the money, which is maybe slightly naive advice on the face of it, but if you dig a little deeper, you can find answers there. So if you want to make a living, the example he cites is if you want to make a living riding your horse because you're, an equestrian person and you love being outdoors, how can you make money riding a horse unless you're a jockey? He said, well, could you maybe think about, could you teach in a riding school? Maybe. Okay, let's unpick this. And then you go into this. So if you... And what I would say to people who are 14, and possibly even people who are older up to our age, I mean, we're all in our 30s, but what I would say is that if you don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life or for your career or for your job, that's fine. But focus, what do you enjoy? And is there any way that you can take some part of that and turn it into something that you do professionally, as in earn money from? And I think that's generally can be... I've lived my life by that philosophy, and I've done all right because I enjoyed music, and so I became a musician. I couldn't always make money being a musician, so I became a teacher of music, but I was still doing music. I enjoyed doing magic, so I became a close-up magician, and I do weddings and stuff. I always enjoyed the atmosphere of being in church, so I became a church musician. I liked the idea of making computer games, so I became a computer game development well, that's a bit much, but I started making computer games and marketing them. So if you can find something that you enjoy doing, do that. And don't worry so much about the money. And I think particularly when you're younger and the whole world is in front of you, my single most important piece of advice, I think, would just be don't get bogged down in it. And actually, if you're at 14 and you're being asked to choose what do you want to study next year, history or music or drama or art or an extra science subject, listen to teachers and listen to your parents, but ultimately listen to yourself and think, what do you want to do? What makes you happy? What is going to give you the most enjoyment? Because yes, you could make the argument that a history GCSE is more valuable than a music GCSE. One could make that argument. I personally wouldn't make that argument, because all of it is an experience and all of it will amount to ultimately the same qualification, which will be a passport to the next level. Now, if you're interested in history, then go and do history. But if you love music and someone is trying to encourage you to do history or something else because that is, and I quote in inverted commas, an academic option, whereas music is not, it doesn't matter at that sort of level. If you think you're going to enjoy that more, go and do that. That would be my impartation of knowledge, I think.
So that's a much better answer than I could give.
Oh, you're both terribly kind. Yeah, so I'm just sort of looking through the key question, the prompts that we had, and I've only sort of glanced at this twice. I think this has been a lovely chat, and we've gone off in all sorts of directions, and I don't know if we've solved anything or if we've drawn any conclusions. Panda, if you, as our guest, would you like to say any final words? And Ash, I'm going to come to you for some final words in a minute, just to get you thinking. But is there anything you'd like to give as a final end to the podcast?
Not a whole lot to add to the main topic. I think my last little lengthy little bit summed up most of my thoughts, although I must say that though we have kind of went in different directions on this conversation, having both a UK and a US perspective on this, I've learned quite a bit more about the UK system than I knew, and hopefully you all have learned a little bit about the US system, flawed as it may be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the same could be said for the UK one as well. But thank you so much for joining us, Panda. It's been lovely having you on our pilot podcast. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, so thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Ash, should we? Have you got a final thought? Ash?
I got a final thought. Well, sort of going along the lines with all the sort of examination stuff that we've been talking about. If there are any of you out there that are getting stressed over examinations, or you were stressed over the examinations that have been for the past couple of months or something, or coursework or anything, towards your sort of academic grading, as it were, you don't need to worry too much about it at all. Life is so much more than just a set of letters or numbers on a piece of paper, so don't stress the examination. Even if your teachers, even if your parents are pressuring you that much, just don't worry about them at all. Things will be fine in the end. If you'll find something to do that you want to do, and exams will not matter by that point. So don't worry about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's much store to be set by the value of working hard and perseverance. But I know it's a cliche, but if you do your best, nobody can ask any more of you than that. If you don't do your best, then go away and have a quiet word with yourself. And if you recognise that, but don't push yourself to do more than you can do. Don't let people pressure you into making decisions that you don't feel in your heart you want to make. And remember that everything you're going to do in terms of exams and schooling, even up to a higher level, up to the age of 25 or higher, everything is going to be a passport to the next step. When I went back and did my teacher training after graduated from my master's, I think I had 2 or 3 years out working. I then went back into education, and I had exams and coursework and stuff that had to be done, and it was all a means to an end because I wanted to be a classroom teacher, and I got through that, and then being a teacher was much more enjoyable than the process of having to train for it. So just keep those little nuggets of advice at the back of your mind, I think, if you find yourself falling into this trap of panicking and thinking that my GCSEs or my SATs are the be all and end all, and if I fail them, then life is over and I will be cast out and all the rest of it, because it's just nonsense. Do your best, and no one can ask more from you than that. And that feels like quite a good place to wrap up. I think some of the questions we've come up with are a lot better than the ones I put down here, which is things like, what even is the education system? Who does GCSEs? Why are AMTHA their freshmen? Middle school with 10th grade.
That's very politics and boring of you.
Oh, he spotted it. I have been watching a lot of Jay Foreman. Middle school with 10th grade A-level sociology, what? Which it took me a long time to come up with the phrasing despite watching Jay Foreman. And actually, if you haven't watched Jay Foreman, you should definitely go and watch Jay Foreman and Politics Unboringed.
Or Map Men.
Or Map Men. There's new Map Men coming out at the moment, and Unfinished London as well is a really good one, even if you don't live in the city. Thanks again to Panda, our guest for this evening. We've been Ash and Ben, and we've been talking about stuff. How do you think it's gone? I think it's gone quite well, actually.
Yeah, it seems to be gone okay. Just sort of rambling on about stuff. It kind of flows all right.
It does. Hopefully people will enjoy listening to us rambling on about stuff vaguely related to education. We haven't got another one planned, either a topic or a guest or a date even, but if it proves to be popular, even if it doesn't prove to be popular, I'm sure we may well end up doing another one at some point. So keep your eyes on the Discords. Tune in for our game nights, twitch.tv/AT_bash, twitch.tv/royal_flush for 1 versus 100 and Wonderwall and Danger Zone and Countdown and all the rest of it. Shall we leave it there?
I think so, yeah.
Seems like a good place to end it. Well, Ash, always a pleasure.
Indeed.
And we should definitely do more of these. Thank you. If you've been listening and you've listened through to the end, that's wonderful of you. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll see you another time. Thanks very much, and take care.
Good night.